Did you know that NBA championship winning teams have just a 3-3 record against Euroleague teams? Probably not. Did you know that when the NBA went global for the first time in history September 8th, 1978, the Washington Bullets, self-proclaimed world champions, played Israeli club Maccabi Tel Aviv and lost 88-87. That was a terrible look for the NBA, and it got even worse. Maccabi Tel Aviv played two other NBA teams in 1984. They beat the Phoenix Suns and New Jersey Nets, and boasted a 3-0 record against NBA teams. How about something more recent? Do you remember that on October 8th, 2014, the NBA champion San Antonio Spurs played Alba Berlin, a German-based basketball team who didn't even qualify for the Euroleague? That team somehow did what LeBron, Wade, Bosch and every other NBA team failed to do. They beat the San Antonio Spurs.
Berlin with a chance to win it. They do! Wow!
No, they weren't load managing. Duncan, Kawhi, Parker, Diaw, Ginobili and Green, they all played 30 minutes. That night, the NBA champions lost to a team that didn't feature a single former NBA player. But this wasn't the only time something crazy like this happened. October 2nd, 2010, Spanish club Barcelona played the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers had just won back-to-back titles. Kobe Bryant was the reigning two-time Finals MVP. The Lakers were the best team in the world, or so they thought. That same season, Barcelona defeated Olympiacos to win the Euroleague championship. They were champions of Europe. The Lakers were champions of the NBA. So what you had was an unofficial world championship game between the best team in Euroleague and best team in the NBA. The Lakers led by 12 points at the half, but Barcelona started to make a comeback, and with 4:19 left in the fourth, the Spanish team took the lead. Fast forward to the final possession of the game, Barcelona up 4. Kobe Bryant, one of the clutchest players in NBA history, had the ball in his hands. What do you think happened next?
Jugar de tres, cuidaditos, se la juega desde muy lejos, no anota, rebote Costa Perovic, el partido está ahí.
And just like that, the game finished. The Euroleague champions had defeated the NBA champions, making Barcelona world champions of basketball. Kobe Bryant shot 2 of 15 from the field. Pau Gasol made just one field goal in the second half. Lamar Odom, Ron Artest, Derek Fisher, they all played. There's no excuses to be made. The LA Lakers were beaten fair and square by a Barcelona team that featured only 2 former NBA players. 3 if you include Ricky Rubio, who was 19 years old and hadn't yet played an NBA game. Was it a one-off? Was it lucky? Let's find out for real, because this wasn't the only time Barcelona played the Lakers during that time period. 2 years earlier, the Lakers would play Barcelona for the first time. That Lakers team had just lost in the finals to Boston, and they'd go on to win their first of 2 championships this same season. This Barcelona team lost in the Final Four of Euroleague, but did win the Liga ACB championship and were made up of mostly the same players from 2010. Juan Carlos Navarro and 17-year-old Ricky Rubio. The Lakers beat Barcelona 108-104, which means over 2 games, nothing could separate these teams. On both occasions, the home team won by 4 points, and if you combine the score from both games, each team scored 206. Fast forward a few years later, October 2012, Barcelona beat the Dallas Mavericks 99-85. They beat the team who had won the NBA championship a little over 12 months prior, and they did so by double digits. For the second time in this video already, a Euroleague club successfully did what LeBron James could not. And what's funny is in 2012, Barcelona didn't even win the Spanish League or Euroleague championship that season. When you hear things like that, it makes you wonder, how much better is the NBA than the Euroleague? Better question, is the NBA even better than the Euroleague? Well, why don't you stick around till the end of the video and find out. To all the viewers watching, I have one question. Knowing what you know now, is it appropriate for the 2010 Lakers to refer to themselves as world champions? Which, by the way, they do. They have a banner hanging in their arena that clearly states world champions. But how can the Lakers be considered world champions if they lost to the champions of another continent? Wouldn't it be more appropriate to call the Lakers champions of America and Barcelona champions of the world? This conversation started with this viral interview
World champion of what?
that's had everyone's Twitter feed in a chokehold since. Look at this tweet right here from Miami Heat guard Tyler Herro. The NBA is the best basketball league in the world, so NBA champions are world champions. I want everyone who agrees with this statement to like the video and subscribe to the channel. So I'm expecting hella likes and 200k subs. Now let me show you why you are objectively wrong. This goes for Kevin Durant, Drake, half of the NBA, mainstream media and NBA YouTube. You're all wrong. The N in NBA stands for national. It is a basketball league in America. If you win an NBA championship, that makes you champions of America and champions of what's considered the world's best league. The problem international hoops fans have is NBA winners declaring themselves world champions without defeating other champions from across the world. And they are absolutely right. How can you call the Denver Nuggets world champions when they haven't beaten the champions of Europe or any other continent? No matter how much better you think they are, you cannot theoretically crown a world champion. And no matter what point you try to make or how much sense you think you make, you cannot become a world champion by winning a national league. And it is factually inaccurate to say otherwise. The definition of champions is to surpass all rivals in a sporting contest or other competition. Now I want you to explain to me how the Denver Nuggets have surpassed Real Madrid in a sporting contest when there has never been a sporting contest that includes both teams. For the most part, everyone agrees the NBA is the best league. Everybody agrees that the NBA has the best players. But that's still an opinion and not fact. To say the NBA champions are better than the Euroleague champions by default every single year without playing them and beating them to prove it, just because you believe the NBA is better makes it an arrogant assumption, and that's what all the fuss is about.
World champion of what?
You're giving them a title they haven't actually earned because you assume the NBA champs would win for your opinionated reasons. How is that fair on teams from other leagues? How can a European team ever be considered the best in the world if they don't get the opportunity to prove it against the best teams from other parts of the world? You can only beat what's in front of you. This past season, Real Madrid won the Euroleague. They beat all of Europe and believe they can beat the best of the best in America too. But they don't have the opportunity to show it. From a sporting perspective, that's not right, is it? What the NBA needs to do is take notes from European soccer. The English Premier League is the NBA of soccer. It is a domestic league widely considered the best in the world. But Manchester City, the Premier League winners, are champions of England. They are not world champions because they won the world's best league. They became European champions by defeating the best teams in Europe in the Champions League, and they can become world champions by winning the Club World Cup. Insert the dumbest argument I've heard too many times. NBA champions are world champions because a quarter of NBA players are foreign. The NBA is made up of 23% foreign players. The English Premier League is made up of 66% foreign players. And yet despite 2/3 of the league being foreign, the English Premier League winners will not refer to themselves as world champions until they become world champions by winning the Club World Cup. Because it doesn't matter what percentage of the league is foreign. The NBA or Premier League could be 100% foreign and they would still be national leagues. Someone needs to hit up FIBA and tell them we need a FIBA Club World Cup to crown an official world champion in basketball. And before you say it's a waste of time because the NBA team would always win, understand that it's no different to European soccer. The world's best soccer players play in Europe the same way the world's best basketball players play in the NBA. And in the last 22 years, European soccer clubs have won this competition 18 times, which means 18% of the time, a team outside of Europe has become world champion. In basketball, this tournament doesn't exist, so the best I can do is reference the 3 unofficial World Championship games when the Euroleague champions have played the NBA champions. In 2007, the San Antonio Spurs beat Panathinaikos, and in 1997, the Chicago Bulls beat Olympiacos. Also, as referenced earlier, in 2010, Barcelona beat the Lakers. Which means that 33% of the time, the Euroleague champions have beaten the NBA champions. Let me guess, that sample size is too small? Fine. Euroleague clubs have won 18% of games against NBA teams, and that's over 91 games dating all the way back to the 1970s, which means NBA champions are statistically just as likely to lose in this tournament as European Champions League winners in soccer. Yet their sport has a World Championship tournament, and basketball does not. Why is that? Perhaps because the gap between NBA and Euroleague teams is not as big as you think? The last NBA team to play against a Euroleague team was the OKC Thunder in 2016. They beat Barcelona 92-89, a close and competitive game. They also played Real Madrid. Now, that OKC team was no joke. They had just taken the defending champion Golden State Warriors 7 games a few months prior. OKC made the Western Conference Finals, the NBA's Final Four. Real Madrid failed to make the Euroleague semi-finals, and yet Real Madrid, starring a 16-year-old Luka Doncic, beat the OKC Thunder and soon-to-be record-breaking MVP triple-double machine Russell Westbrook. But we haven't got to see Euroleague teams play NBA teams of late, which makes this Jimmy High Roller take a little misleading.
In fact, the NBA's record against international teams over the last 42 games is 41-1.
Yes, NBA teams are 41-1 in their last 42 international games. But what Jimmy High Roller didn't mention is that none of those 42 games played against international teams have been against Euroleague clubs. Well, except one. In his list of 42 games, Jimmy starts his statistic with OKC's win over Barca in 2016, but conveniently leaves out the Thunder's loss to Real Madrid just a few days earlier. You can't be cherry picking stats. The NBA hasn't played Euroleague teams since 2016. They have instead played international teams from weaker leagues like China's CBA and Australia's NBL. In Europe, they'll tell you the NBA's reason for this is to hide the fact that some Euroleague teams have caught up to NBA teams and even surpassed the worst teams in the NBA. So the question is, how much better are Euroleague teams than the CBA and NBL teams that got smoked 40 times in 41 games against NBA teams? And if you compare the Euroleague's record and win percentage to China's CBA and Australia's NBL, you can clearly see Euroleague teams are significantly better than other international teams across the world. Let's look at the numbers and find out how close Euroleague teams are to NBA teams in comparison to the rest of the world. To do this, we need to look at every game played between Euroleague and NBA teams. Here's what I found. NBA teams have an overall record of 75-16 against European teams. That means 82% of the time, NBA teams will win. But it's a bit more complex than that because over time, European basketball has improved a lot, especially over the last 40 years. From 1980 to 1999, NBA teams had a record of 23-2 against Euroleague teams. In the 2000s, NBA teams had a record of 32-5 against Euroleague teams. But from 2003 onwards, when the Euroleague was formed until now, NBA teams have a combined record of 52-13 against Euroleague teams, which means 80% of the time, the NBA wins. In the 2010s, NBA teams had a record of 20-8 against Euroleague teams, meaning 71% of the time, the NBA team won. But you can see that by the decade, the games are becoming more competitive. Now let's add some context to these numbers. Of these 63 games between NBA and Euroleague teams since 2003, 40 of them have been played under NBA rules with NBA refs in NBA arenas. NBA teams have a 36-4 record under these circumstances. That's a 90% win rate for the NBA. But what about under circumstances that suit the European teams? When playing away from home, NBA teams have a record of 16-9. NBA teams win just 64% of the time against Euroleague teams in Europe. However, even when NBA teams were on the road, These 25 games referenced were played under NBA rules with 2 NBA refs and 1 Euroleague ref. In my personal opinion, if NBA teams played under FIBA rules with Euroleague refs in Euroleague arenas, that 90% that became 64% would drop below 50%, and Euroleague teams would be NBA teams more often than not with their rules, their refs, and in their house. I know that's an opinion and you want facts. So let's take a closer look at the 52-13 record the NBA has over the Euroleague since 2003. That stat doesn't tell the whole story, because the common argument isn't that NBA teams aren't better than Euroleague teams. The argument is that the best teams in Euroleague can compete with NBA teams. Although Alba Berlin beat the NBA champions, that fixture alone proves that some of these matchups are unfair on the European team. So let's look specifically at the Liga ACB, the Spanish league that is widely considered the world's second best domestic league behind the NBA. The 2 biggest clubs in the Liga ACB are Barcelona and Real Madrid. Real Madrid, the most successful Euroleague club, have played 6 games against NBA teams since 2000. They have a 2-4 record, meaning Real Madrid have won 33.3% of games they've played against NBA teams. Barcelona have played 7 games against NBA teams since 2000. They have a 3-4 record, meaning Barca have won 42.9% of games they've played against NBA teams. So the top 2 clubs in the Liga ACB have a combined 5-8 record against NBA teams, which means the 2 teams collectively have won 38.5% of games played against NBA teams. If you were to win 39% of your NBA games over an 82 game season, you would win 32 games. Let's include CSKA Moscow, historically the best Euroleague team outside of the Liga ACB. CSKA Moscow have played 9 games against NBA teams since the year 2000. They have a 3-6 record, which means CSKA Moscow win 33.3% of games against NBA teams. So Real Madrid would have a 27-55 record. CSKA Moscow would also have a 27-55 record. And Barcelona would finish with a 35-47 record. Let's put these records into the most recent NBA season and see where these Euroleague teams would finish. Both Real Madrid and CSKA Moscow would have the 27th best record in the NBA. Barcelona, with a better record, would be tied with the 21st best record in the NBA. To make for a more accurate representation of European teams, let's combine Barcelona, CSKA and Real Madrid into one singular European team. Based on these calculations, their record is now 89-157, which means collectively they'd average 29.5 wins a season. If you round that up to 30, then Team Euroleague would have the 25th best record in the NBA last season. Now there is an important piece of context missing that I want you to take into consideration. These Euroleague versus NBA games are calculated between 2003 and 2016. Since 2016, international basketball has improved at a rapid pace. And we see this in the NBA. The last 5 MVPs have been won by foreign players. The top 2 NBA players right now are European. The 2 most desired NBA players under 25 are both European also. Team USA finished 8th at the 2019 FIBA World Cup. They failed to win a medal at this year's World Cup, lost 3 times. The last 2 World Cup winners are European. So isn't it safe to assume that the Euroleague has improved a lot during this time period as well? The proof is there, you just don't want to see it. At the 2023 FIBA World Cup, the Lithuanian national team with 1 NBA player beat a Team USA squad worth over $1.2 billion. People can say what they want about it being the C squad, but if that Team USA roster played in the NBA, they would be expected to win the NBA championship. No NBA team in history has had as much depth and star power as this year's Team USA squad. And if the Lithuanian national team was to play in the NBA, with Jonas Valanciunas as the number 1 option and no other NBA players, they would probably finish with the worst record in NBA history. So in theory, If the worst NBA team ever could beat the most expensive basketball team ever assembled, how can people sit here and say that Euroleague teams aren't capable of beating NBA teams? The conclusion we just came to was that the best Euroleague teams would consistently finish with around 30 wins in the NBA. However, like NBA teams, Euroleague teams are also better or worse on a per year basis. So when we calculate Real Madrid and Barcelona's records, some of those games are several years apart. What we can't calculate is how the best version of those teams would do in the NBA. For example, the Real Madrid Euroleague championship winning team from 2017, with Luka Doncic, Campazzo, Rudy Fernandez and Sergio Llull, that is arguably the best Real Madrid team of the 21st century. So if these Euroleague teams are projected to win 30 NBA games, is it not fair to assume the best version of the best Euroleague teams would do a lot better? I believe certain Euroleague teams would finish with a 500 record or above and win playoff series in the NBA. Like the 2009 Barcelona team, they went 50-5 that season. They played one game against an NBA team, the best NBA team with the best coach and best player in basketball. They won that game too. What more other than relocating to the United States could that Barcelona team do to prove they were the best basketball team in the world? How about a hot take? I think in a 7-game series, 09-10 Barcelona versus 09-10 Lakers, under FIBA rules, Barcelona win that series. Whoa. Let me explain to you why that is not as far-fetched a take as you think. The 2008 and 2012 Olympic Championship games. Team USA beat Spain twice by fine margins in 2 very competitive finals. The Spanish national team was mostly made up of Real Madrid and Barcelona players, plus Marc and Pau Gasol. Yes, they lost in both finals. They lost to Kobe Bryant and 2 of the greatest teams ever assembled, including LeBron James and an All-NBA player at basically every position. I know this is becoming very hypothetical, but if Spain, made up of mostly Barcelona players, can hang with 2 NBA dream teams, it is very possible the real Barcelona team could beat the 2010 Lakers in a 7-game series, especially when you consider the fact we already have proof they are capable of beating them. The bottom line is, I cannot prove how good Euroleague teams would do in the NBA, but on the flip side, you cannot prove how well NBA teams would do in Euroleague, which is exactly why we need a competition that settles this, not on a podcast, not on Twitter, but on the court.